Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new show, Sattology, Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth, Logos means a study or science, Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. Mythology is exactly opposite of that. Myth means a fake lie, imagination. Mythology means a study of imagination, or something which doesn't have historical, archaeological proofs, or even astronomical proofs. So today we have a very, very special guest, a great friend and a great orator, and I love his research and with a light-hearted banter. So you'll enjoy this show as usual. Today we're going to speak on the narratives, global narratives, and how the global narratives impact local governance. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Welcome, Abhijit.
Thank you for having me. Very well.
Abhijit, the biggest the narratives today, the defunding the police, and a lot of these defunding the police going on, and other narratives which is attacking the democratic societies. Why the defunding the police, according to you, is a global narrative, not just American narrative?
I don't think it's a global narrative yet. It is very much an American narrative precisely because, of this myth of it being the oppressive edge of the state. The issue is, if you actually look at the non-Anglophone world, I think the problem with America is all its points of self-reference tend to be Australia and Britain and just the Anglophone countries, which seem to have a very similar take on things that which themselves look for America, for validation kind of thing. So it tends to be a kind of echo chamber. But I don't think that's the case anywhere in the world, especially in the non-Anglophone countries, because those other countries are not governed by idiots. They know their anthropology. They know it is the state's monopoly on violence that makes a country safe. Coming from India, where the state has never had a monopoly on violence, I can tell you what a perfect hellhole it is being without a police. Even a bad police is better than no police. A state without the police is like that movie, The Purge, which was then turned into a TV series as well. I'd really urge you, it is very dystopian, but that is what the world without police looks like. Because this nonsense that, somehow all violence is because of, social trauma and all that rubbish is just complete, shockingly untutored hogwash. Now, it's fine as political propaganda. It's fine that it's Kool-Aid. The problem, like they say, to use an Americanism, is when you drink your own Kool-Aid.
Los Angeles police last year or 1 year back was defunded by $150 million, which is a big one. They stopped the women's grievance cell completely. And then the homicides increased in LA.
It's only going to get worse. The more you defund the police, the worse your policing is going to get. And the less it is going to get. And the less and worse your policing becomes. Because even at its worst, right now when it is fully funded, it is nowhere near as bad as when it is reduced funded or completely defunded. So enjoy yourselves. You're getting exactly what you're voting for.
Now, in India also, the police forces are regularly defunded at the state level. And the politicians, then the state governments in India, there's a live example, they regularly create law and order problems for the other people for political reasons. And it is happening in the US also. When the police is defunded.
So in India, it is not a question of defunding the police. In India, it's a question of never funding your police. They are never the priority for any government in India. We have the lowest police to citizen ratio anywhere in the world, or one of the lowest. And this for a country where we have extremely high societal violence. So, and where the police isn't specialized. Investigation and enforcement are not separated. So there's severe confliction of interest. And in most cases, the police are usually in cahoots with local crime. Why? Because they're severely underfunded. And in order to maintain the semblance, the placebo of calm, they have to collaborate with criminals. And I think that is where America is heading. It's turning itself into a third world country because, these states of evolved peace and things like that, they simply don't exist. It's an anthropological impossibility. You can't have it. So best of luck trying, but you're coming back to uh, like you're coming essentially to becoming, you fast track yourself into becoming a third world country. So congratulations to you. Of course, America was always behind the rest of the world in terms of monopoly on violence, precisely because of the Second Amendment and guns. Now, as much as I love guns and Adi loves guns, we love guns. But there is something to be said about, reasonable restrictions on guns. Because that particular amendment that gave them the right was happening when you had a wild, wild west where attacks on settlers and things like that were very common. Lawlessness was extremely high. It is only after the Industrial Revolution that you've had the ability to enforce a state monopoly on violence. Very rare. It seldom ever happens, but it's happened post-industrialization. I think there's been a severe misreading of that law, which never allowed the police to function the way it should, which led to a militarization of the police. In a sense, it's the right wing that scored an own goal out here. That their need for the Second Amendment was so high, the need to retain guns, etc., that they won a tactical victory, but a strategic defeat. Because the strategic defeat is that the police got delegitimized because they were never able to control gun violence properly. And in response to it, because the level of civil armament was so high that they had to arm themselves even more, the left has hijacked that contradiction. And now it's become a case of a full-blown defunding of police, first the militarization of police, then the delegitimization of police, and finally the defunding of police. So, this guns has been one of the major disagreements that I've always had with the American right. And the easiest example that they give you is, this is how Hitler took over. When he took over Austria, they first took away people's right to have guns. And that is why Austria fell to the Nazis. Complete hogwash. Please remember, you could have had your Glocks or Walther PPKs or whatever it was, and wouldn't have made a jack shit of a difference to the Nazis, because they would have just come in with their Stukas and Messerschmitts and bombed Vienna to rubble. Right? So this is a completely wrong argument. But anyway, it is what it is. Congratulations to the American right. You've won your right to retain your guns, and in the process, you've turned your country into a third world country because the left has stolen what they could. Congratulations.
Now, coming to the next to the point, and I was researching on this topic a lot. Now, the most of the times the left and many, I would say, and I'm not going into any religion or something, but it's the nations which declare themselves as Islamic nations, the police forces are very, very weak and deliberately kept weak. Do you think it's the left and the Islamic combined which is demanding this? Because when I see in the US, the people who are opposing or proposing defunding the police belong to the same group most of the times.
No, that's not entirely true. I can tell you, having been to Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, the police there is exceptionally good. Right? In the UAE, it used to be a kind of a nepotistic police. They're now becoming a very, very professional force, and Saudi police is also going the same way. That nepotism will continue just like it did in UAE for a long time, but over the last 5-6 years, the UAE police is superb. Saudi police will ultimately get there. Iranian police has been there for a very long time. In fact, people who do not trust the Pasdaran, the Basij and the Pasdaran, the Revolutionary Guards, but they will trust the police because the police is not as brutal as people make it out to be. Okay, and they're a very well-policed state, in fact. So, if you look even within the Muslim world, policing is as good or bad as the state of development. The more developed you are, the better the policing. The less developed you are. For example, in Egypt, the police is a joke. I remember in Syria, the police was in patches good and in patches very, very bad. Right? So it really depends. It's not a generalization out here. It has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with the state of development. In That's Advait, by the way, who just jumped up on my bed. Say hello to Advait, everybody.
Hello.
What happens is sorry, where was I? What are we talking about?
Egypt.
Police.
Egypt.
So with police training, with investment in human beings, that is how you get a better police force. Now extrapolate this to America. The problem isn't with the religion. The problem is with the demographic you are choosing to come into America. Okay. There are a lot of Muslims who come into America who want to have absolutely nothing to do with violence. The problem is, if you want to have all this bleeding heart brigade and bring in trash like Ilhan Omar, etc., 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 you're going to have a very high criminal population, which is already compromised through illegal immigration and things like that in there. People don't seem to realize this. But one illegality is fungible. One form of illegality leads to another form of illegality, which is why that sudden influx from Syria into Europe led to skyrocketing rates of crime. Why? Because they were overwhelmingly male who had, paid smugglers and things like that to be transported over. They were from a particular younger demographic because the old people didn't want to move. It was mostly the younger people who wanted to move, the young go-getters who wanted to move, who lived in a society where the state did not have a complete monopoly on violence. Like I said, about say 1/3 good police and the remaining 2/3 terrible police, and no state monopoly on violence, incidentally, who then move into a society where the state does have a monopoly on violence, and because of the deterrent value, have reduced the number of police, but they still have this sort of impunity of coming from a second world country, well, a borderline third world country, where the state did not have a monopoly on violence. They feel they're free to do whatever they want. This is the same social incompatibility of migration to America that you're facing. Right. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the fact is that the demographic from Muslim countries immigrating to America is particularly badly chosen because anthropological factors are never considered. Because anthropology, like they say, facts are racism. I mean, that's the new woke credo. Facts are racism. Feelings count. Feeling is reality. Facts are racism. So there is a great intersection between poverty, criminality, illegal migration and criminality, and therefore between poverty, illegal migration and criminality, which is manifesting itself in defunding the police because they feel that they are the biggest targets of the police, when in fact, they end up killing more of their own than the police ever do. The police is a very convenient scapegoat. But that goes with this whole woke credo that you never take responsibility for your own actions. You are a murderer, you are a rapist, you are a gang rapist, not because you did all of that. It is because somebody 1,000 years back set in motion a chain of events that deprived you of privilege that made you this way. Like I keep saying, this entire wokery, defund, that's all intersectionally connected. It is basically extending that sort of initial pubescent mental immaturity well into 50, 60 years of age. So enjoy yourself.
Now, in India, the police laws are 1920. Still the 1920 police laws are there. And you also told in the earlier shows that the police laws have not been reformed in India. And so it is still a colonial force where people are sort of scared with the police also. Do you think that reforms are essential?
It's a vicious cycle. On one hand, it's colonial, so it was never meant to be about justice. It was meant to be about keeping the calm so that the wealth extraction could continue.
Law and order.
So it was a minimal expenditure police force. In America, on the other hand, because colonialism ended quite early, it became a justice based police force very quickly, but that itself had its own downfalls. So, you need to look at other countries that where the police has actually had a very natural evolution and been pretty decent in the way it's evolved, like say France or the UK and things like that.
To the next narrative, which is a big problem right now, and we already discussed wokeism in one of the last shows. The one of the narratives is that the justice is denied to the racial blacks generally, or in America that is said, but the same narrative gets copied over in India in terms of religions. Now, the Americans are working on the justice reforms. There is significant move toward justice reforms, and which is not as adequate as possible because there's a systemic problem. Do you think that this kind of narrative is really valid, or it is just a propaganda tool to gain
It's
votes?
never been valid. It's always been a propaganda tool. Because remember, why is it that police brutality is disproportionately on black people, but not on Asian people or Indians? I mean, I can tell you I am darker than most of my African American friends that I know. They're significantly fairer than me or my family in America. But also remember, black on black violence is far, far more prevalent than police on black violence as well.
That's right.
The statistics are all out there if you bother. But then, the only answer to that is statistics are racist. So, I mean, you don't want statistics, you don't want facts, you don't want anthropology. What you want? Basically, you've made up your mind. This is X, Y, Z, and anything that floats your boat is what you want. Okay, congratulations.
The elections are run so much on social media nowadays, especially in US. Elections are entirely run on Facebook, and literally every single politician tries to capitalize on Facebook and mailers. And the narrative is so strong on Facebook and all the tech platforms and even the mailers. The narrative is so strong that
Look,
people.
this is what amazes me about America is how when the establishment makes up its mind that this is the narrative, everybody goes along with it. In the 50s, it was the McCarthy anti-communism trials. Everybody went along with it. Everybody participated in the purge of so-called leftists in America. The Red Scare. Then when it came to, Vietnam, everybody decided it was a good idea. Then when everybody decided it was a bad, when somebody said it was a bad idea, then everybody decided it was a bad idea. Today they talk up Woodstock and all that crap. Woodstock was almost entirely irrelevant when it actually happened.
That's right.
It was no big shit. Then there was the Iraq War. Decision taken, everybody supported it. Have you ever seen New York Times, Washington Post, any of them apologize for what they did during the Iraq War? Absolutely not. Today's great, I don't know if you've read 1984 by George Orwell. There's those 2 minutes of rage per day where you're meant to take the party slogan and absolutely rage about it for 2 minutes every day or whatever. This is like that. Critical race theory is just that. You call it critical race theory. I call it the worst kind of anti-white racism.
Now, the Indians have been rebranded in the race theory as Caucasian, brown Caucasians. And they are.
The Slavs have been labeled people of color.
Yes.
So apparently Slavs are people of color and Indians are white, proximate, Brahminical, heterosexual class oppressors. Shush! Daddy's talking.
so the even the dog is barking on that. So the
He's trying to get some cuddles. Can you see him?
yes. Hello, how are you?
That's my little boy. He's too cute. He's such a handsome little boy. He's such a handsome little boy. He's daddy's little boy.
So this narrative is getting stronger in the academics. So in the campuses, the people are teaching these philosophies as like agitating students. Now the curriculums have changed to such an extent that Confucianism has become cool in the campuses, American campuses. Now it's become cool, and gradually it's picking up. Earlier it was Marxism, now it's Confucianism. There are Confucius institutes in more than 250 universities in USA today. 250.
I'm sure there are, but I seriously doubt the value of Confucianism in these universities because having been to a Confucius Institute myself, I can tell you that I used to spend my entire day there going, are they serious? Like, do people actually fall for this drivel? And I'd just be staring at the wall going, how dumb would you think I actually am to fall for this kind of gobbledygook and codswallop? So if people are falling for this kind of shit that the Confucius Institute peddle, I think it really shows you how far American society has fallen. Right? I think there was a lot that Confucius said that was actually very profound. And in that sense, Confucius's belief in hierarchy is very important. It's like the Catholic belief in ecclesia, which then Cardinal, who later became Pope, Ratzinger said is like, what happens if a tibia or a carpel don't feel that they're a tibia? If the tibia thinks it is a carpel and the carpel feels it's the tibia, then your whole body stops to function, ceases to function. So, there are a lot of overlaps in these kind of things. And the more and more you look at it, I think it's, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in religion, even though my atheism is not like Western atheism. It comes from the Vedas. It is intrinsic to our belief. It starts off as agnosticism, but it progresses towards full-blown atheism. Initially I used to think a post-religious society would be an enlightened one. And I realized that is complete codswallop, because religion, for all the evil that it has brought a certain social order. And, because it has grown organically with human beings over the last 10,000 years, humans have learned how to negotiate it. On the other hand, with wokeism, it's just bouts of epileptic schizophrenic madness that come over God knows when. It's like a constant pogrom. It's like a constant purge. So, far from it, you find that a post-religious society, the more that religion goes down, the more wokeism rises, because wokeism is the new form of social control. And in that, it is much more capricious and much more tyrannical. But it is the new religion. And it is far worse than any other religion, because all the other religions had science in them. To some extent or the other, it was a negotiated process. Here, there is no room for science, because science and the fundamentals of science are racism, apparently.
So it goes against the common sense. So can we say that wokeism and debunking, law enforcement, all these things are signs of adharma coming to the campuses?
It is adharma. It is the fundamental definition of adharma, because it is what? Vinasha kale viparita buddhi.
Correct.
At the time of destruction is when your mind goes berserk. And notice the sequence. Even though it says vinasha kale viparita buddhi, it can imply anything. It can imply one is the cause of the other. It is the cyclic thing. It is like the snake eating its own tail kind of thing, right? So it's definitely leading up to that. I mean, we're living in Kali Yuga.
No,
So it is.
I can never imagine what America has become in just in front of my eyes in 20 years. Like, I don't even recall, like, what was America today, 20 years back.
Up to 10 years back, I used to tell my students when I was teaching in Australia, back here, all my interns, I used to tell them, look, the greatness of the West is you are always open to facts, you are open to course correction, and there is none of this respect for hierarchy. The greatest strength of the West was its openness to new argumentation, new idea, to heresy. The biggest victim of wokeism has been free expression and heresy. A society that cannot have heretics cannot succeed, because all progress is created by heretics. When you have a movement where all heresy is condemned, all questioning is condemned, where the very basis of your jurisprudence and facts and evidence-based research is condemned, you can never have progress.
Americans prided themselves in free speech, and free speech is quarantined now. And I say that is worse than COVID-19 right now, because the people cannot express themselves. And the frustration is
In the
rising day
end,
by
see,
day.
the thing about COVID will kill people directly. Wokeism won't kill you because of the first order effect. It will kill you because of the second and third order effect. Ultimately, it will start killing you for the first order effect, because once you realize that your plans are all failing, you have to silence people up and keep people to the dogma. So then you start the creation of the police state and things like that. It's the same argument that people give me, that Stalin was an aberration from communism. No, he wasn't. Or if I had been Stalin, I would have done things differently. No, you really wouldn't. Because understand, the party structure itself was one where you could not become who you were without being Mao Zedong or without being Stalin. And if you did not do what they did, because the party was predisposed to it, there would be somebody else who would come and replace you who was ruthless enough to do what they did. Right? So this is all codswallop. I don't buy these arguments.
I know so many police officers who are very wonderfully discharging their duties, and they are very honest, simple taxpayers. And believe me, they're not paid much according to American standards. They can just maintain with two jobs. Some of the police officers do two jobs, three jobs a day. Morning, during the day, they are police officers. Their evening, they are working on second jobs to just run their families. Now, to them, and these are honest people, to them, and I stand by them always, I have always stood by them, that it is so difficult for them to hear this. It's a very painful. So one way you can say defund the police. The second is distrust the police. Never happened in the USA. I know there are rogue cops, and I'm not speaking about them, but these are the law abiding and gentlemen who are actually working on these areas. Now, the biggest problem for them is demotivation, big time, big time. So now with this kind of philosophy, wokeism and defunding, you're actually spreading adharma, and at the same time you are demotivating a large group of dharmic police officers, or people who just want to do their duties. So isn't that narrative is going to come to India also to some extent?
No, it isn't. I think we're fairly insulated from it. I think a lot of these narratives, they only last within about 10, 12,000 people within the heart of Delhi, and then they dissipate.
So in my next question is the Morocco and the French connection. The refugee attacks on Europe are increasing day by day, and we see that large groups of refugees moving from all parts of the world to Europe. What is the ultimate
That
goal of
was the
those things?
case. That isn't the case anymore now.
Uh-huh. To Spain, yeah.
I think that has mostly been stopped, right? There is no more. I mean, there's very limited refugee movement.
8,000 they moved, 4,000 were turned back, 4,500, and 4,000 are still there. It's not yet turned back.
They,
But
they'll be. I don't think there's any willingness to absorb any more refugees left in Europe anymore.
will it have an effect on the global political dynamics where these refugee attacks are going on?
Refugee attacks, how?
Like refugees migration to these Western countries?
It's had the effect it had to. I think the biggest casualty of refugees was the European Union, the idea of the European Union, right? This belief that they could just absorb anybody when they were already under the stress, severe multiple stresses, for them to absorb. And they never learned their lesson. You know, when they absorbed the former Second World countries of Eastern Europe, they first needed to stabilize them. Even before they had stabilized them, they started absorbing a wave of refugees, which in no small way, incidentally, contributed to Brexit. You know, the downfall, not directly, but indirectly, the second, well, mostly the third order effects. They've learned quite a bit. And I think you'll find that they are hardening their stances slowly. Germany, because of its historical baggage, is hardening its stance much slower. But Italy and France has been absolutely unapologetic about how it's hardening its stance. Spain is also doing it very, very quietly.
So in the current administration, the democracy establishment in other countries, that is now a little bit lost in a way. Like the US is not pitching for many countries to accept democracy. Do you think that that's an
I don't
ideological
think there's
shift?
any need to accept democracy. Most of the world is democratic anyway, in one way or another. So it's not democracy promotion anymore. It's selective democracy promotion at best. I don't think they're going to do regime change anytime soon because it's we've seen what democracy promotion led to. Syria led directly to the European crisis. Libya added to the European crisis. So it's been a string of disasters. So this notice nobody talks about the responsibility to protect anymore.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, what's happening in Burma? What have they done? Damn all. It shows you the level of disarray that there is now in the West about its democracy promotion programs. Remember, democracy is not a right. Democracy is a privilege for countries who have societally earned their place as democracies.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Now, coming back to the global arms sales now with the Iran-Palestine, Israel-Palestine crisis, and in the global arms, do you think that the Israeli Iron Dome, which is mostly based on American missiles, is going to get more prominence in the global world as being a sales item?
Not really. It's a very uniquely suited to Israel thing because the smallness of the country, the size, extremely compact country, extremely narrow country, value, the high value of each individual citizen, the nature of the threat is very, very unique to Israel. The only market that the Iron Dome will find will be in terms of naval close-in defense.
Mhm. So one of the things which has been now being spoken in the American sphere is the demand for Indian reforms for protecting minorities. Now it's going to come up in a big way. One Congress resolution is already being introduced. Do you think that India is going to be in a position to talk with Americans on that, or they're going to reject such kind of interference by the Americans?
India will do what India does, which is we will take absolutely no action to prevent. We will actually allow the resolution to go through and then we'll throw a big tantrum because that is what sells. That is what the government believes, and that is what gets you promotions in the government in India. If you preemptively bust a narrative, there are no promotions for you in India because the leaders believe, what did this guy do? It wasn't a big issue anyway. So, the system is actively against you if you nip things in the bud. You need to allow it to become very, very big. to the point where you can no longer deal with it. And your reward is then not action, it is words, it is petulance. Let me give you an example. The Delhi riots. All the misinformation that was being put out about the Delhi riots in January and February 2020 when President Trump came here. The Ministry of External Affairs clarified jack shit. Then when the US Council on International Religious Freedoms passes a resolution, then our useless dolt of a foreign minister puts out this very petulant statement that makes him look like a micropenis jackass, which is what he is. And everybody goes, oh my God, so brave. Oh, wow, he put out this statement. So that is what I'm telling you. The system will not incentivize you if you nip things in the bud. In order to become popular and prominent, you have to let the situation go out of hand. That is how you get promoted in the Indian system. It's what Israel says about intelligence. Everybody knows our failures, nobody knows our successes because we can't talk about our successes. So you have to put out, you have to convert your failures that people talk about into successes in your mind. Like, Don Quixote tilting at windmills in La Mancha.
That's right. So one of the last questions I have, Abhijit, on the narratives only, because these narratives are attacking everybody. So I was comparing narratives to in one of the last shows or something, I was comparing it to the Ravan's Marichi, like he was creating a narrative in front of Sita or Maya, like the fake, which is mostly attacks the mind. And if you are on the social media, then only it affects you more. If you're not in social media, nobody cares about it. So do you think that now the social media has become so important, and I've been saying it for 1 year to Indian government, I have said to everyone, I said that every country needs to develop their own social media platforms for their country. Otherwise, it gives a chance to other countries to interfere in their local narratives.
India did. It's called coup. And unfortunately meant to rhyme with poo, and it functions exactly like its rhyme sake. It is poo. Most of the coups that you put out don't actually go out. Nobody can see them. It's such a failed poo of a platform. It really shows you the lack of Indian IT prowess. Because everybody says India is such a great information technology superpower. No, we're really not. Where your mate Consuela from across the border, we're like that in terms of IT. Where what imported immigrant labor is to housework and housekeeping in American hotels, Indians are to IT in America. Low-level programming workforce at best. The one or two that go up the ladder are actually the exceptions that prove the rule. India's IT prowess is extremely low. We do back-end, repetitive, non-innovative, routine work. And it shows you in a platform like Coup. If your viewers haven't seen it, it's called KOO. Go download it and see exactly how useless it is as a platform.
The problem,
which is why the Indian government also hasn't transitioned to it, even though they tried promoting it. Because half the coups you put out, they're not even visible. You can't attach links to it. You can't attach photos to it. And they say we're improving. I'm yet to see an improvement in the last 6 months. So, after a point, if you're trying to put out information and the information isn't going, you're pretty much done with the platform. It's finished. So coup became poo even before it took off. So yes, we should. The problem is we don't have the wherewithal to do it. And incidentally, what is the incentive for folks from across the globe to come onto coup? They're not, I mean, the Japanese prime minister isn't going to come on to coup, or the American president isn't going to come on to coup just because he needs to have a presence everywhere,
That's right.
right? There has to be some normative value of it,
No,
which it doesn't have.
the social media platforms have become a great help for the American government to express their to spread their narrative all over the world, and that's how it is happening. Where the
It
coup is,
isn't for the American government, quite the contrary. It is a cartel, much like a feudal, a medieval, a very dangerous medieval feudal cartel that actually takes away power from the government.
that's
I
right.
will any day, every day, trust a government over a private corporation with my personal information. All right.
You're right.
The problem is this has outsourced so much of the functioning of the state to private corporations. What you're seeing is exactly the kind of decentralization you saw of the Roman Empire, which ended up being an absolute disaster for them, of the Byzantine Empire, of the Sassanid Empire, of virtually every centralized empire, that the moment it turned feudal, it just collapsed.
You are
And they
abs-
invariably tend to be much more violent, and you're seeing all of it fit in. Periods of greater social churn, periods of greater social violence, periods of greater social polarization, combined with periods of greater corporations substituting for feudal lords who have way too much power. It fits a classic historical pattern of societal collapse. This is how the Roman Empire ended. This is how the Western Roman Empire ended. This is how the Eastern Roman Empire ended. This is how the Sassanid Empire ended. Okay, it is standard.
I totally agree with you. India of the size of 1.3 billion people, and myself being very active in the IT sector even till date, I can tell you one thing: India doesn't have the infrastructure for apps. India doesn't have infrastructure. Such a big country doesn't have the infrastructure. And the infrastructure doesn't mean cables. Infrastructure means other things like apps and launching the apps and other things. It doesn't exist. Now, in that absence, now I'm talking about 1.3 billion Indians. Now, what narratives that they can set on the global level without the absence of these kind of technologies now or the infrastructure?
India can't set damn all narrative. You don't have the intellectual heft to do it. You don't have the institutional heft to do it. Your institutions have zero credibility. The so-called intellectuals who had credibility are part of a different cabal, which was part of the old status quo, which opposed the new status quo. So you have zero ability to create any damn narrative. And this government basically, it's a government of social, it's a government of yuppies, nouveau riche trash. Not even nouveau riche. They haven't even made money. They don't even value money. So it's essentially the sort of doughy-eyed, uh, inbred hillbilly from the mountains of West Virginia, from the Rockies, like that movie Wrong Turn. Have you seen that movie Wrong Turn? Horror movie. It's like one of those inbred freaks coming to Washington, D.C. and trying to set up a government.
Abhijit, thank you so much. Today you answered so many questions which are American concern. And one thing good to me, and I totally agree with you, these American narratives are not going to spread all over the world on defunding the police, because globally the police is differently worked. Most of the police in India is not armed, and most of the police in other countries are not armed, the regular ones who are on the streets. The militarization of American police has been a danger which is seen all the time. We have seen it all. You've seen it. Now the third phase of that is defunding the police, and the fourth phase will be distrusting the police, which is already started. So thank you, Abhijit. Would you like to add anything to that, today's
No,
discussion?
I'm
It's
done.
it's always a pleasure, Abhijit, to have you, and discussions are pretty frank. Thank you all. Do watch it on YouTube and do comment over there and let us know your feedback. Thank you for all the students who are watching it live. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you.